I mean, every word the president said there is, am I allowed to say on Times Radio, or a load of old I'm not sure.
We'll find out.
I think I just did.
In this video, Andrew Neil completely destroys Trump's tariff policy with straight facts, making Trump look tiny, just like his hands.
The question is, what does Donald Trump want as a result? Here he is speaking about Europe last night.
Europe's treated us very badly. We put a big tariff on Europe. They are coming to the table. They want to talk. But there's no talk unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis. Number one for present, but also for past. Because they've taken a lot of our wealth away, and we're not going to allow it to happen.
Everything Trump said in the speech is nonsense. He speaks about not allowing other countries to take their wealth away. And I'm going to let Andrew Neil explain exactly why this is just a completely flawed argument.
Well, Andrew Neil, what do you make of that first from Donald Trump? Because it does set the tone, doesn't it, for this conversation about, oh, how do we get out of it? Maybe there isn't a way out.
Well, it sets the tones for negotiations. It doesn't sound to me like there are going to be any negotiations. It's also complete nonsense. I mean, every word the president said there is, am I allowed to say on Times Radio, or a load of old bollocks? I'm not sure.
We'll find out.
I think I just did. I mean, let me just tell you, in the last 50 years, this trading system that has done America so badly, in the last 15 years, real per capita incomes in America, in the last 50 years, have risen from $28,000 on average to $70,000 on average. That is what real incomes in America have done under this trading system that has supposedly done America down so badly. And over the past 4 decades, America's share of global GDP has stayed at 25%, while Europe's has collapsed, Britain's has collapsed, China's has risen, other emerging markets like Singapore, Japan, Philippines, as they once were, have all risen. But America has held on to a quarter of global GDP over the past 4 decades. Now, in what possible universe could you regard that system as being a bad system for America, particularly since America wrote all the rules for that system? No wonder it did well. It designed the rules. So this idea now that Europe has treated America very badly, America's been on the wrong end of all this, it's just nonsense. And we're dealing with somebody now in the Oval Office who is totally divorced from economic reality.
So how do governments like the government here in the UK deal with that? Because the Prime Minister is going to try and start dealing with it today, but he's not yet, I don't think, phoned Donald Trump. There have been calls with lots of other leaders. Europe is meeting to discuss retaliatory tariffs. What do you think is the best way forward now?
Well, I think the idea that you could deal with this man on any basis of dependability, or if you come to deal with them, the deal will still be in place the following week, I think that's really difficult to do. You know, we were told that these tariffs were being introduced and they would form the basis of a negotiation. You just ran that very important clip there from the president saying that, yeah, I'll deal with the European Union, but they have to pay us a lot of money first. Well, on what possible planet is the European Union going to pay the United States a lot of money? It isn't going to happen. And also, don't forget, the purpose of these tariffs in Donald Trump's mind isn't just to restore what he regards as some semblance of fair trade. It's to raise a ton of money. It's to be an alternative source of revenue to income tax and corporation tax and all the rest of it. Well, I'll let you into a clue. You cannot use tariffs to bring people to the bargaining table to then get rid of tariffs and use tariffs to raise a lot of money.
Andrew makes a brilliant point here. The tariffs were implied to be open to negotiation with other countries, but in reality, it feels very much like the big man-child has thrown a tariff tantrum and closed off the sandbox.
It's one or the other. Yeah. You can't do both. And that is something that Trump is going to have to come to terms with. I think as far as Britain's concerned, the Prime Minister's reaction so far has been wholly inadequate. These tinkering with the rules about buying cars. I mean, you can't go and buy a car now without the government's hand being all over it. You need about 6 different pieces of permission from government, depending on what type of car you buy. It's absurd. Here's the big issue. the really big issue for Britain's car industry. There are millions of Chinese electric cars on their way to the global market. The Americans have put an enormous tariff up, 54%. That'll hit them there. The Europeans have put tariffs up as well. We have put no tariffs up. Our car industry is totally open, totally vulnerable to Japanese electric cars. And unless we do something about that quickly, we will not have a car industry by the time this decade has ended.
And it's such that question about what the UK government does on trade, because there are some people who say, well, those cheaper models, if we bring them into the UK, it actually might have even if it's only in the short term, a sort of a good impact. It might bring down inflation. It might help people afford to buy things that they maybe wouldn't necessarily have been able to.
Well, it's uncomfortable for him because hitherto he has regarded particularly the performance of the American stock market as the best metric of his performance. You know, in his first term, he was always boasting, the stock market is up. This was pre-COVID, obviously, which shows what a great president I am. Well, today, the obverse would be true. The stock market's down, which shows what a useless president you are. So I think that is embarrassing for him. But everything I've seen suggests that he's going to double down on this, and that Britain needs to make its own way and start doing deals with other parts of the world. You know, we are part of the Pacific Free Trade Agreement now. We need to up that and get better free trade deals. We need to reopen the Australian free trade deal and improve that. We need to get a better free trade deal with the European Union. And we do need to decide, you know, at the moment, there are voices inside the British government, I name you one, Mr. Ed Miliband, who love the idea of all these cheap Chinese cars coming in because it will help him to reach his net zero targets. Okay, well, it probably will. But the cost will be there'll be no British car industry. So if you don't want a British car industry, by all means, let the Chinese cars take you to net zero. There's no way we compete with them. They're dumping them on the European and British markets now. They're dumping them at below cost. They're building ships to bring them 5,000 at a time. If we let that come in, then we will just simply destroy a British car market, which, for all its ups and downs, still exports, for example, to the United States over £6 billion worth of cars every year and provides really high quality, high skilled, highly trained and highly paid jobs. Why would you let that go without a fight? And the question I would ask, in our political system, who speaks for the people in our car industry anymore? You know, it used to be the Labour Party. The Labour Party was the party of unionized workers, people who worked in the car industry. Well, the Labour Party today is the party of the metropolitan white-collar classes, the public sector workers in metropolitan areas. They don't speak for the car workers. The Tories thought they did. They won the Red Wall. They don't anymore. No. They let them down badly. So who is standing up for the blue-collar worker in Britain today? I don't see politicians doing that.
Andrew raises a great point here that I agree with. Unfortunately, in the UK, no one really speaks for the working class anymore. It takes footballers or celebrities to help the working class instead of the politicians in charge.
We need to move on, but before, just finally, Andrew, when we played that quote about Europe from Trump, it's so baffling, this idea that Europe owes America money for past sins, which is so completely wrong-headed when it comes to history. I just wonder, is he thick and he doesn't understand it? Is he mad? He doesn't understand it, or he does fully understand this stuff and he just is manipulating in a very deliberate way. I can't quite work out where to pick him because he is a hugely successful figure in global politics. He's a very dynamic character. I'm not needlessly slagging him off. I just wonder, when someone could say something like that, why would you say that?
This is a great question, and I want to get your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Trump is playing dumb on purpose, or do you think he really doesn't know what he's doing? Let's see what Andrew Neil has to say about it.
Trump has a massive grievances in his mind, both personal and nationalistic, about America. And I think it's a mistake to try and divine any kind of coherent economic policy within that massive grievances. He's like an old mercantilist, is what we used to call them, in which everything's a net zero sum. if I get something from you, then the only way we can be equal is if you get something from me. The idea that I get something from you, but then together we grow more and the overall cake rises, that's not the mercantilist way of doing things. The mercantilist way is that either our trade should be balanced or I should be running a surplus with you. Otherwise, I'm being ripped off.
Yeah.
And what he wants is compensation for all these years in which Europe has run a balance of payments surplus with America. He kind of wants compensation for that, as if it matters. You know, the first law in economics is let bygones be bygones. That's the first law. And so why bother about all that from the past? And here's the other thing. America has benefited enormously. We talk about goods and services and so on. The other part of international trade is capital flow. And money pours into America, or did, from the rest of the world, which allows America to run massive budget deficits, massive national debt, massive investment in the country that otherwise it wouldn't get. So the idea that it is a zero-sum game really is economics for dummies.